To how to be a humane leader without losing your job. Dive deep into humane leadership crafted for today's fast-paced business world. Listen to our podcast on all major streaming platforms and join us as we explore the essence of humane leadership in today's dynamic business landscape. The host, Roberto Torres, is a consultant engineering leader alongside Chris Ollerkin, a Fortune 100 IT leader. Today, we will be discussing how do you approach your humane leader about a pay raise. Hi, sir. How have you been?
I've been doing good, Roberto, and I'm glad I don't need to ask my boss for a pay raise. I hope your boss is paying you fairly.
It is. It is. Thank you very much. And congratulations on that video background. It is amazing.
Thank you very much. I love scuba diving, and this is one of our favorite islands in Bonaire.
I,
It's a Netherland Antilles near Aruba. It's a beautiful place.
I can see that. Well, this discussion goes further than just asking your humane leader about pay raise. Maybe it is also when to do it and if the time arises or not, isn't it?
Yeah, and certainly in different companies' cultures, I know there's going to be big differences on when's the best time to do it and how best to approach it. So we can cover both the gigantic company, the startup, some ideas about things in between, but there's also a lot of common threads for when you're asking for a pay raise to go through all jobs. And it's things like, do you know what your worth is? Do you really know what your job title is? Not the one HR made up to give you, but really a title that's reflective of your actual duties, because those duties really dictate what you're worth to the company. And sometimes people have similar titles, and I'll just pick on database administrator. I'm a database administrator. Yeah, so am I. Oh, great. Well, then how come this database administrator is getting paid $120,000 a year and is overpaid, and this database administrator is getting paid $150,000 or $170,000 a year and is way underpaid, yet the titles are the same? How can that be? And that's really when, what are your real job duties for whatever your title is, technical or administrative, director, senior director, vice president. It's really around what are your duties and what are they worth to the company that helps dictate, is it time to approach your boss for a better pay raise?
Yeah. Let me add something. Here in Latam, we don't think in salary terms on a yearly basis. We only think in a monthly basis. So maybe you don't know about this, but yes, when we go to a new company or we ask for a raise, we say what we earn on a month, and how much do we want to earn. And yes, I think that one thing, going with your example, let's say that a system administrator for a database might earn too much money on the eyes of someone, but is it your value worth that? And what I mean is it is really different to manage a 1 million record database versus a 100 or 200 million a record database. So one thing is, how much value do you provide to the company? How much value do you provide to the department? And what are the numbers that you have earned? And what I mean by numbers, it is how much either maybe savings you have gained to the company, or maybe some new customers, if it's related to sales or a different department. I think the most important thing when you ask a, your leader for a pay raise is how much uh, have you increased or decreased certain numbers that will be important for the company.
Absolutely. The more you can use objective, very fact based metrics is critical in approaching your boss. Whether it's a humane leader or a terrible boss, your metrics and your facts are very critical in having that discussion. And so, and I don't want to pick on database administrators, it's any role, but there's almost always objective measures to a role that you can use to promote. Look at how much I improved something compared to 6 months ago, and take those facts into the discussion with your leadership about your proposed pay raise. And also know, really objectively, think long and hard about this. What is it that you're worth on the outside? So you gotta, when you go on LinkedIn or some of the other job-based sites and look at, what's the pay scale for a particular role, it can have a very wide spread, sometimes 2 and 3x from the lowest to the highest dollar amounts, right? So again, in the US, we kind of talk annual salaries, yearly salaries. So again, if you might see a role posted that says it pays anywhere from $100,000 to $500,000, how do you objectively understand that? Well, the reason you're not making $500,000 is that, again, picking on database administrators, that database administrator is the most senior database administrator at Netflix who does video optimization in the database to feed out to millions and millions and millions of customers per second. Okay, that database administrator has a lot more responsibilities, has a lot more technical skills than the administrator who's administering the SQL database that has 10 customers connected to it, that handles a boutique, unique set of data that's not even a gigabyte, right? So those two database administrators may have to tune some of the same parameters in databases around indexes and caching and things like that. But clearly the responsibilities of the database administrator at Netflix is significantly greater than the 5-person company that's feeding their database to only 10 customers. It's just, be realistic about the scale of your role, so that when you have that discussion with your leadership about the pay raise, you have some idea where you fit between that 100,000 to 500,000. Because if you're truly doing a role that's worth 250,000 and you're only getting paid 100, we definitely want to get you into that market bracket. But you need to be objective about your skill set, because your leadership is going to know through HR. They employ, a company as big as ours, we employed outside services to even analyze salaries and things like that to see if they're competitive. And we purposely targeted to pay at about 75% of the market value. So you were definitely getting underpaid, and it was on purpose. It's part of the corporate strategy. And that's so that, in a gigantic company, you're very replaceable. Yes, there are some key scientific roles and some very key top level people that are very, very critical to the company. But in general, even senior directors are not really that critical to the company, and the company is not going to pay the same amount for a senior IT director at Netflix or Google or, something like that as compared to our company. Why? Because you're replaceable. If you quit today, the job posting will probably be out by Monday to replace you. So you need to understand that, okay, if I'm getting paid half of what I should be, yes, even in a gigantic company, come with your facts, have a discussion with your manager about getting a pay raise. But if you're high to market, the big, huge company is going to say, go ahead, go look for a better job. We'll find somebody else. They really won't care that much.
Nice, nice. Let me tell you that in startups it's kind of different. And I will draw an example that it is not related to IT, that is related to marketing. Depending on the phase of the startup that you're in, you're aiming for different objectives. Let's say, for example, that you're in a pre-seed startup. That means that what you require right now, it is user growth, okay? So if someone from marketing comes to you to another company and say, okay, I brought from 1,000 users to 100,000, you say, oh, nice. But at what time frame? How long did it take? If it tells you 3 years, dude, there's no place for you here because it's too much time. But if that person made it on a 6 month time period, oh my God, really well, from 1,000 to 100,000. And from there, let's say that you have moved from a pre-seed to a seed stage on a startup. Okay, what do you do with those 100,000 users? Okay, you make them, or excuse me, you try to convert them into paid users. And usually the number of conversion, it is 3.2%. So it is really, really low. If you can manage to have a higher conversion rate, you're amazing. You have a lower no. So usually, depending of the stage in a startup, it is the objective that you're looking for. And one thing really important about this is the problem that is a benefit in startups is like this. When you have a pre-seed investment, you usually receive between 500,000 to $1 million investment. When you jump to a seed investment, you could jump from $5 million to $10 million. And that at that moment, the people within a startup, let's say for instance, a CTO, might search for engineers, and these engineers could earn a lot of money for LATAM, not for the States, okay? For LATAM bracket. And maybe they will be earning from, I don't know, $1,000, $2,000 per month to jump to 4,000 or 5,000 for senior roles. So when a startup has money, is looking for many different positions, and they begin rising. And what they're looking for is someone who does their work really, really well, who can provide immediate results, and who can withstand all the pressure. So if you are trying to work for a startup, and you could extrapolate all this data and say, okay, I can provide results. Let's say I'm an engineer. I can provide results really fast. Okay, I did this application, or I did this algorithm in maybe 2 weeks time, or and I can withstand the pressure because I used to work at this startup. You're going to probably get hired faster.
Exactly. And it's those objective measures, that make the big difference, as you can talk about those numbers. The other thing that you're competing against in a large company is they have a lot of employees. So there's a very good case that there may be somebody who's already employed by the company who could do your job. And so they don't actually need to go outside and hire anybody. They could transfer in your replacement. So you also need to be somewhat aware not only of the competitive environment outside, but even inside the company and around you. In a startup, you don't have as many employees, right? In a company where there's 130,000 employees, and maybe again, sticking with IT, if you've got 130,000 person company, you might have 1,000 IT employees. And you may be using outside contractors that also might be willing to come work for the company full time. You have a large pool of people internally that you could potentially be competing against. So not only do you have to know if your salary is competitive to the outside, you need to know, are you that replaceable that someone inside the company could take over your role pretty quickly. So I think, in your case, your example of, look, the company's growing and you're expanding and you're bringing in more users that are buying into your service, that skill set is going to be worth even more to the company, because you don't want to all of a sudden lose that key employee and have to spend time hunting outside trying to hire somebody, right? That could be weeks of delay or maybe even months in a bad situation. That might really impact the growth of your user base or your sales and your startup. In a gigantic company, worst scenario, we'll just hire a contractor temporarily while we look for your replacement. So, you need to be very objective about your situation to understand how much leverage do you have to ask for that pay raise.
Oh, yeah. And objective, it is a powerful word over here. And the thing is, let's say, for instance, that you're in a startup and your wife is going to labor in a week time, so the expenses are going to be high, much higher. And you have realized that you don't have the money. So if you go to your boss, to your leader, and say, "I'm going to have a baby, right? Allow me a raise," you ain't going to get it. What you're required to have is, usually, what I do is to mention a project. And I don't mean a specific project, but what you're going to bring to the company in the near future. And if you could sell this project, even though you might not be in sales, to your leader, it might be an out of cycle raise in which you might get something. But rather than saying I will have a baby, it is like, I'm going to bring 100,000 more users if it's a marketing. I'm going to release our Storm cards 20% faster. I'm going to reach the OKRs maybe in 1 month time instead of 6 with this. So you have to wave a. This is a phrase in Latam, but I don't know if it's in the state as well. Wave the carrot in front of you and
Yep.
say, "Hey, you want this? Okay, I'm going to reach if you're going to allow my a pay raise."
Absolutely, completely agree. And you mentioned timing, out of cycle versus in cycle. Again, different companies, different sizes are going to have different rules around that kind of stuff. As a large company, there is a pay raise cycle. In other words, that the approximate date that your boss is going to conduct a performance review and tell you what your pay raise is in March. So you need to be talking to your boss about your performance in December and January, because in really large companies, they start planning the pay raise cycle as early as January. And so, you need to be aware of those kinds of things too, that if you're going to try and get your pay raise, a higher level of pay raise, it's part of that performance review cycle. So make sure that you talk to them about that, talk about how, again, with those objective measures, making sure that they're clear to your leadership, so that when the pay raise cycle occurs, they have those good objective things that you did for the company in mind, and then they can do the pay raise. And in our company, they had the pool. So you might have a pool of money that you could distribute amongst your team. And then there was usually a small amount of discretionary pool where, let's say, you did really good, Roberto, I'm going to give you a 5% pay raise. But you did an outstanding job and you brought these objective facts to me, so I want to get you another 3% on top of that for a total of an 8% pay raise. That would be, in our company, a huge raise. Assuming inflation's not too bad. There's been some, during this inflation period, there were pay raises that were double digits that were just normal pay raises. But assuming inflation is normal, that would be a gigantic pay raise. And it would be by using this pool of standard money plus the extra money that HR allows you to lobby for. As the leader has to make the case to get this extra money for the employee. So you need to be, especially in the big, huge companies, they have a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of rules about pay raises. You need to know how the system works. Even if you don't manage people, you can ask questions. Ask your leadership, how does the pay raise cycle work? What kind of information do you actually need to make the case to get me a better pay raise? Because maybe you're coming to your leadership and they want to give you a better pay raise, but you didn't bring them the right information to help them have the argument with HR, because HR's role is to pay you as little as possible. So always keep in mind, HR doesn't work for the employee. HR barely works for the leadership. They work for the CEO. HR's job is to make sure employees get as little compensation as possible so that the company's super profitable. HR's job is not to pay you as much as possible. So keep in mind when you approach an HR person about pay raises, even though they're going to be nice to you and they're going to talk nice to you, keep in mind that even if it's not written down anywhere, their objective is to pay you as little as possible and get as much work out of you as possible, because that's capitalism. So keep, you really want to get that pay raise, and I want you to get it too, because I'm a nice, humane leader. But be aware, the company's got to stay profitable. We can't pay you 10 times what the market rate is. It's just not going to happen. We're not even going to pay you 115% of what the market is for that job. In a gigantic company, you're doing really well if you get 100% of the market rate. That means they really want to keep you if they're paying you 100% of market rate.
Nice. Yeah, there are certain words, powerful words that you mentioned that it's important to rephrase. And the first one, it is to lobby. You have to think about you, not about your team when you ask a pay raise. That is the first one. The second one, it is to be in contact with your leader. Because I have seen people who got into 1 year at work and say, where is my raise? And they haven't talked with their leader, and they don't know if there's going to be a pay raise. Especially in a startup. If a startup it is successful, there will be pay raises without you noticing. If it's not, there is a slim chance that there will be a pay raise. That is one of the negative traits of a startup. And the third one, inflation. In Latam, there is an inflation that could skyrocket. Let's say, for example, Colombia. I think when I went back in January, from today, they have a 5% inflation from just in 6 months. So an inflation could go maybe in Colombia, Argentina, or Venezuela, maybe other countries, maybe to go 100%. So you really need to be aware of that, because if you receive a 20% salary raise, but inflation was at 100%, it's negative. So
Yep.
you have to be really, really aware of that. And I totally agree. One thing is, even though it is a startup, you have to be giving more of what you can do. If the company doesn't provide the salary raise, it's like, as we have spoke many times, you could go to another company, because another company is going to recognize your value, is going to see a fit between their problems and the solutions that you have worked before, and it's going to be a match. And especially in startups, as I mentioned before, if you have done have a user grow from 1,000 to 100 users in a startup, you could provide that solution to another startup which is eagerly craving for someone like you. So be aware of your surroundings, of the industry your startup it is. If your powerful values are to be done in another industry in a startup, and you could get work like a startup like this.
Yeah. And one thing I also wanted to touch on is blackmailing never works. So, meaning you go to your humane leadership with, hey, company X offered me 30% more. And whether it's true or not, whether they did offer it or you're lying and saying, hey, yeah, they offered me more. I think you mentioned once one of your friends or a contact tried that once. In a huge company, very rarely will they make a counter offer. It needs to be a role that's really hard to replace for a large company to not say, oh, all right, well, you're giving your 2 weeks notice. All right, thanks. Goodbye. And again, there's always different rules for different countries, but in the United States, if you came to me, even though I'm a humane leader and I really want you to be on my team, you come to me and say, hey, company X just offered me 20% more. And let's say my HR department says you're already making 110% of the market rate. There's no way, no matter how much I plead with HR, they're not going to match that job offer. They're going to say, nope, give him his 2 weeks. They're going to leave in 2 weeks. HR will not budge on that, no matter how much your humane leader pleads. So I'm not a strong advocate of you going and trying to use a counter offer to get you more money to stay in the same company, at least not in huge companies. If you are, though, going to approach your humane leader in a huge company for a pay raise, you do need to be aware that they might think, well, if the company can't do it, maybe the company's not performing well. So be aware of that. If the company is not performing well, don't bother asking for a big pay raise, because in a big company, the answer is going to be no, no matter how good you are. But if you try and blackmail, and maybe you're not doing it on purpose, but you're telling your boss that, look, I went on interviews and I can get 20% more. In a big company, they're just going to have to let you take the 20% and go. Because I think maybe one time out of 50, did we ever make a counter offer to somebody who had a role, a job offer from another company to get them to stay. It's very rare in big companies.
Yeah, and if someone tries to do this to me, I will let them go as fast as I snap my fingers, because if they do this, they will do it later. You had a 20% raise for these guys or more, they're going to keep searching. So
Yep.
that says a lot about the character of this person. And I rather let them go than suffer later.
Yeah, without a doubt. And clearly there's huge differences between the startups and the gigantic companies and all the company sizes in between. So be very aware of what the company culture is. Try and talk to some peers that have been at the company longer than you about just how does the process work. If you've only been there a year or two, it's sometimes hard to fully understand the company's culture and the company's rules. And there are rules no matter how big the company is. Some of them are written, some of them aren't. Know what the rules are around that, because even at the most humane leader may be bound by rules, and there's no point in you trying to go against something that the humane leader can't do no matter what anyways, right? So ask around, see what other people have done, what other people know, find out what the situation is in the company that you're at, because knowing that culture will have a good impact on the discussion you can then have with the humane leader, because you know what the rules are.
Very good. Great. I think with this, we can end this episode. Thank you very much.
Good. All right.
Okay.
Nice talking to you. Good luck with the pay raises.
Not me, but yes. Thank you.